in a free time.
Angle grinder rack.
I've accumulated a number of angle grinders over the years, and I've never really had a specific place to keep them and all the discs and blades and flaps and stuff that go with them. So I wanted them close at hand, but I also want them to have a specific place to go. I started looking around at what was commercially available and what others had done on the internet. And with the added constraint of trying to use mostly material I had laying around, I came up with this design. I modeled the design in CAD for reasons that'll become obvious later. I'm also trying to learn how to use Blender a little bit, so here's a gratuitous render of the design spinning. The main portion of the rack is made up of a 16 gauge steel plate that I picked up at the local metal supply place in their cut-off area for cheap. In order to get the holes as consistent as possible, I decided to try and use the CNC router to do it. The machine I have is called a mostly printed CNC machine, and it's made with 3D printed parts. I built it to be about 2 feet by 2 feet usable area, and it works pretty well. It's actually, I've used it on a number of projects and it works well, but it's really not terribly stiff and not intended for heavy duty metal work. You can see here with the styrofoam test cut, it does a pretty good job. But as soon as I started to cut the steel sheet with it, I ran into problems. I'd planned to drill all the way through the sheet with this 1/8" drill bit, but I don't have spindle control, speed control, so it's really spinning too fast, and I made it through about a dozen holes before completely destroying the drill bit. I then changed the setup, so rather than drilling all the way through, it was just barely touching the metal in order to mark the location where the hole should be, and that worked out pretty well. This process worked reasonably well overall, but I think I probably could have gotten just as good a results with a transfer punch and a piece of wooden pegboard. You can see from the deflection here that even with just barely touching the surface, I'm asking too much of this CNC router to be working on steel. Once I'd marked all the locations with the router, I went back and drilled them by hand, starting with an 1/8" drill bit. I then went through and enlarged all the holes to 1/4 of an inch. Finally, I used a countersink bit to deburr all the holes. I then cut and welded up some angle iron to serve as the rail in the front that the angle grinders hang off of. I also welded on some smaller pieces of angle iron on the back to serve as mounting brackets and to space it away from the wall so that the hooks have room to go through. I cleaned up all these welds with an angle grinder and a flap disc. The final step in fabrication was a rattle can paint job. Used a little bit of self-etching primer and then followed that up with a coat of red paint that I had. To mount the rack, I drilled through some mounting holes and then enlarged the hole in the front in order to get the head of the screw to fit through. So here's the completed rack. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and my angle grinders now have a place to live.
Bye, thanks for watching.